Thank you for being here this afternoon. The health and safety of our residents and the protection of Hawaii's drinking water are my top priorities, and they are the top priorities of the State Department of Health as well. As events have transpired over the past few weeks, there is a new sense of urgency to our work. Today, I met with the Secretary of the Navy and other Navy officials about the water contamination at the Red Hill shaft. I appreciate the Navy's announcement that it has temporarily suspended its fuel operations at Red Hill. This is an important and necessary first step, but there are still really important questions that need to be answered. We are actively engaged in getting to the bottom of the issue as quickly as possible and as safely as possible. We need to know what happened, how and why it happened, and what steps are going to be taken now that we need to find a long-term fix that accounts for all the needs of our local and military residents. The State Department of Health is issuing an order to the Navy to immediately suspend operations, including fuel transfers at the 20 underground storage tanks at the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility. Director Libby Char and Deputy Director Kathleen Ho will provide information about the specific provisions in the order. I want to emphasize that we are acting deliberately but swiftly. It is important that we take steps based on the latest information as it becomes available to us to ensure the long-term health and safety of our people and the environment. We look forward to working with the Navy to ensure that the requirements of the order is satisfied.
Our next speaker is Dr. Libby Char, Director, State Department of Health.
We'd like to thank the Navy for voluntarily suspending operations at the Red Hill facility. The Department of Health's mission is to protect human health and the environment. We are issuing an emergency order today in furtherance of that mission. This order will provide a framework for everybody to get to the same goal. It defines each of our mandates and statutory responsibilities. We know that there has been contamination of the Navy's drinking water. We still don't know how or at what point the contaminants are entering the water system. We are issuing this emergency order as a matter of public health and to protect the people in our community. Until we are confident that the system is petroleum-free, the Department of Health's advisory that all Navy water system users should not consume water stands. We are one community, civilian and military. We look forward to working together to protect our environment and our drinking water. Deputy Director Kathy Ho will walk us through the order.
As the Director of Health, Dr. Char mentioned, we're serving this order to protect public health and the environment. DOH is ordering the Navy to immediately suspend operations at Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility, take immediate steps to install a drinking water treatment system at Red Hill shaft, submit a work plan and time schedule within 30 days to assess the system's integrity and to take corrective action as necessary. And within 30 days of completion of the corrective action, defuel Red Hill underground storage tanks. DOH continues to work with its partners to restore clean drinking water and to address other health and environmental issues. Thank you.
Speakers have completed their remarks, so reporters who are joining us virtually, please raise your hands if you have any questions. And we'll go first to what you use now. Daryl.
Yes, the question for Kathleen Ho, please. And also the governor.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this order essentially is a permanent shutdown of the Red Hill facility. Is that correct?
Well, what we're asking the Navy to do is to suspend operation at Red Hill, do an assessment of the tanks and integrity of the system, and defuel. If at some point the Navy, if at some point the tanks have been remediated and corrective action has been taken, they may apply for a permit or ask the permission of the Department of Health.
So essentially, at this point, Kathleen, you guys are taking affirmative action to prevent the use of Red Hill until they can come back to you and get a full and complete permit that would govern their operations for the foreseeable future. Is that correct?
What we're doing is protecting the environment and public health by ordering the Navy to suspend its operations until corrective action can be taken.
Okay, moving on to Christina Jedra. Christina?
Thanks. I just want to make sure I understand. So you're saying within 30 days, the Navy has to defuel Red Hill, or what? What if they choose not to? I spoke with the Navy Secretary today, and he said, he would take such an order as a request, not an order.
Okay, Governor, taking that question.
Certainly we would be working with the Navy to implement the order. We both share concerns to protect the water system here on the island of Oahu. We'll be working to identify the cause of the contamination of the Red Hill well, and certainly working to get experts within the Navy and elsewhere to identify corrective action to be taken. I think it's premature to suggest what that would look like until we can determine what the cause of the contamination is and what actions are necessary to correct the situation.
Christina, did you have a follow-up?
I do. Governor, is it your belief that you have the authority to order the Navy to defuel? Because it seemed to be the opinion of the Navy Secretary that perhaps he doesn't have to listen to the state.
Certainly, the federal government and the Department of Defense can operate separately and differently than the state. We are acting within the current state law about our requirement to regulate water sources here in the island, and we are using that authority to issue the order.
And Kathy Ho has something to add.
Yes, the Department of Health entered into an administrative order and consent pursuant to Chapter 342L, which is the underground storage tank chapter of our statute. We also recently issued, as you know, a notice of violation against the Navy under the same provisions.
Thank you very much. Going on to Sophie Cox, Star Advertiser. Sophie?
Thank you, Jody. This is a question for the governor. The Navy said today that they had actually suspended their fuel operations at Red Hill on November 27th. Did they notify you on November 27th of that? And do you have any sort of clarity as to why it was stopped on that date? Because the Navy said that they didn't start hearing reports of concerns about odors in the fuel until the next day, I believe, on November 28th.
No, we did not discuss that specific information, and I was not aware. I was aware that they had announced that they would be stopping refueling and the movement of fuel within the bulk storage facility.
Any follow-up, Sophie? Go ahead, Sophie.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just for clarity. So when Governor, were you informed about the suspension of operations?
I was informed at a meeting that I had today that they had voluntarily suspended operations. I was not aware that it occurred prior to that.
Okay, going to Tom George, KITV. Tom?
So just to clarify, it says within 30 days of any corrective action, what metrics are we using to figure out what's considered a corrective action? And what do you say to people that say they should be defueled and the entire Red Hill should be shut down in general, just given the fact that there have been multiple times in the past that there have been leaks?
Happy for taking the question.
So the Department of Health would like to take this in a step-by-step basis. And so what we're doing is we're asking them to assess the integrity of the system, including the tanks. They will write a report or give us a work plan and implementation schedule. We'll review that. Department of Health will review that and we'll assess it and approve it as needed.
Okay, Tom, follow up. Go ahead. Tom, did you have a follow-up?
Oh, yes. Sorry. So within 30 days, they have to do that. And kind of what metrics will you be looking at to make sure that, when you say that the system does have integrity, what would that look like? And how could you reassure people that, if it's them saying that as the Navy without kind of an independent look at it as well?
Yeah, so what we're asking in the order is that within 30 days, they provide us a work plan and implementation schedule. And then from there, we'll send it will be sent to the Department of Health, our staff, our technical staff. They'll review it, make any recommendations or any comments on it. If they have no comments, we'll seek that they will start the implementation process of that work plan or remediation.
Okay, Scott Kim, Hawaii Public Radio. Scott?
Thank you, Jody. This question is for either the governor and or Kathleen regarding the defueling, the logistics of defueling. Considering it's 180 million gallons, it's a lot it seems like there would be a lot of logistics involved. Will the state be working with the Navy on finding a place to store that fuel, or is it sort of up to the Navy to handle it themselves?
We would expect that the Navy would look at what the requirements of defueling would be and develop a plan to be able to accomplish that. And we would review their proposal and then seek to ensure that they implement it.
Hey, Scott, follow up?
Yes, thank you. For the governor. Governor, when you discussed the situation today with NAVSEC, did you tell him that this order was coming down? And if so, what was his reaction to that?
We did discuss the order. We talked about the need to protect the public health. And certainly he expressed his commitment that the Navy would be taking appropriate action, that they have not been able to operate the facility in a way that they should be. And certainly he was committed to identifying the problems and taking corrective action as necessary.
I believe, Kath, did you have something to add, Kathleen?
The only thing I'll add is that in reviewing the plan to defuel, the safety of the people of the state of Hawaii would be utmost.
All right, moving on. Daryl Huff, go ahead.
For Governor Ige, this has been an extraordinary week, and you've been watching the Navy's actions, and today they pledged and said we've been completely transparent and so on. But they didn't inform you that they had stopped operating the facility back on the 27th. They also dropped a bunch of reports of monitoring well things on you in the last couple of weeks. What has the behavior of the Navy in the last week done that convinces you that you have to take this action?
We have been looking at the reports as they've been made available, and clearly finding fuel in the Red Hill well is a concern for everyone here. especially since we have not been able to identify the source of the contamination. And we believe that it continues. So, we are taking this action because we believe it's necessary to stop potentially making the situation worse, identifying, focusing resources, hiring experts, identifying what the source of the contamination is and how potentially it is occurring, and then developing a course of action and making the investments necessary to remove the contaminants from the well, so that we can assure that we maintain the clean water that we all need and want.
Right. Daryl,
Just-
do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, very briefly. 2 points, though. I mean, it sounds like the process you're describing is certainly a multi-year process. Is that fair to say? And the treatment program you're asking them to do, would that be sufficient to treat the water if it actually reaches, if the contamination reaches the public wells as well? Are you asking that they also protect the public wells? And also, this is a multi-year process, I think you're describing.
I mean, I do believe that the corrective action is not something that will happen overnight. It is something that would have to occur over a period of time. And so I think it's premature to speculate what that might be without the Navy having the opportunity to bring in experts so that we can examine the information and the data that we see and hopefully identify the source of contamination.
Thank you, Governor. Moving on to Christina Jedra, Civil Beat.
Thank you. The Department of Health and the state in general have had years of warning that Red Hill was a threat to our drinking water. So this is for the governor and Director Char as well. How do you respond to criticism that the state hasn't done enough to keep people safe and has actually been very deferential to the Navy up until this point?
We certainly recognize and acknowledge that the bulk storage fuel facility is an important asset of the Department of Defense for the entire Pacific region. And so we have been working with the department. We have been monitoring and putting monitoring and requirements for sampling so that we could be aware of what is happening to the aquifer. Certainly, we had been acting on the Navy's commitment to improve the facility, to reduce the risk that would occur should there have been a spill or an accident. And certainly the fact that we found fuel in the water in the Red Hill well compels us to take this action at this time.
Thank you, Governor. Christina, follow-up for you?
Yes, thank you. I recognize that the state has required the Navy to install monitoring wells and all of that. But the purpose of those was to act as an early warning system, right? To give people notice so that they would know a problem is coming before fuel comes out of their faucets. What went wrong here? Is this an indication that the state, didn't have enough early warning systems in place?
Certainly we did require test results from the wells on a regular basis. As we had incidents and spills, we did require increased sampling. And certainly we do believe that the system did work by identifying the fuel in the water at this point in time. And that what is compelling our action.
Okay. Thank you very much, Governor. Sophie from the Star Advertiser, go ahead.
Yeah, this question is for the Department of Health. Both the department and the Navy have indicated that they have a couple of theories about what may have potentially contaminated the Red Hill shaft. Could you talk about what those are and whether they may be related to the earlier pipeline issues. And also I had a question about, in terms of draining the tanks, it's such an enormous amount of fuel. And if the problem hasn't been identified, are there any concerns that draining them at this point could actually create a bigger problem? For instance, if there's a problem with like the pipes that hasn't been addressed.
That's a very good question. So I'm going to start with the first part of that. I think we had been seeing numbers kind of trend up a little bit, but there's more than one cause. And I think to date, we have had conversations about what they think led to some of the releases on May 6th and on November 20th. But to date, nobody can quite figure out how is it that the fuel is getting into the water system at what point. So that remains the $1 million question that we are still trying to figure out. As far as the fuel defueling and transferring of fuel, you're absolutely right. That is not a simple thing. That is not an easy thing and is not without risk. So that is a huge, huge deal. It's very easy to just say, drain the tanks, but you need to make sure that you do it safely and that you don't create more problems by doing that than by just sitting tight. So, it's the Department of Health experts on this, working with the Navy folks, and they have a lot of experts to try and evaluate the system and figure out how to safely do the defueling. And the issue is that we still don't know at what point the fuel is entering the water system. So that's why things need to happen very reasonably and very logically. This is not anything that we're going to rush into overnight.
Thank you, Dr. Char. Sophie, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I also wanted to ask the Department of Health. I had asked this to Governor Ige earlier, but with the Navy saying that they had suspended the operations at Red Hill on November 27th, I was wondering if the health department had been given any indication as to why. I mean, it suggests that they were concerned there was some problem with the fuel operations, but at the same time, they're saying that they weren't aware of any sort of issue with the drinking water system and complaints about odors and so forth until the next day.
Hold on, Sophie. Okay. Kathleen will be taking your question.
So we know that there were releases. November 20th, there was a release. May 6th, there was a release. We knew that there were releases, but we didn't actually know that there were any health risks as a result of that, because it wasn't until the 28th that the military families began complaining about the odors and the taste in their water, which is why this we're engaged in this incident now.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Moving on to Christina Jedra, Civil Beat.
Thank you. Can someone explain what exactly the DOH is doing to investigate the source or the cause? What methods are you using, if you can explain them in layman's terms?
Good evening. My name is Joanna Sito. I am the Environmental Management Division Chief for the Department of Health. At this time, the department is working together with our technical staff to do a sampling plan to make sure that we are addressing all of the different areas of the entire Navy water system to ensure that the water is safe to drink. We are doing this in a systematic manner and are encouraging the communities to please refrain from using the water as we had requested in our press releases. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I believe we have Daryl, go ahead.
Yes, again, for Governor, I was trying to get at this earlier, and I'm not sure I got to it. You know, the Navy, the local Navy officials have been promising transparency this week in particular. They say they've always been transparent. They're promising it this week. They've been describing actions that they've taken to protect the public and their own Navy communities. But the fact is you guys are making an order. You basically are saying, no, we're going to make this a legal requirement. Is this an indication that you no longer trust the local leadership to do this job safely?
No, Daryl, the order being issued is really to establish a framework about how to move forward. It's asking the Navy or directing that the Navy suspend fueling operations at the bulk fueling facility. It's asking that they look at a water filtering system so that we can remove contaminants from the Red Hill well. And it's asking that they assemble a team to assess the overall system and ensure that it can be operated in a safe way that doesn't put the water system of Oahu at risk. And so that's what we are focused on. That's why we felt compelled to issue the order, so that there would be a clear roadmap about actions that we expect to be taken that would allow us to identify the source of the contamination and then engage experts to identify what corrective action is appropriate. That's why the order was issued.
All right, Daryl has a follow-up. Go ahead, Daryl.
Yeah, it's just, Governor, I'm sorry, but I just feel like the public needs to know eventually whether the Navy is trustworthy, whether you, as Governor of the State of Hawaii, believes the Navy is trustworthy and it can be trusted with this process. I mean, do you feel they can be trusted with this process, or are you getting a little bit cynical about what they've said and what they've done?
No, I'm not cynical of the Navy, Daryl, and I did express and emphasize with both the secretary and the other Navy officials that we met with, that the public has lost trust and confidence in the actions of the Navy. I clearly hear it in my discussions and conversations with the general public. And so I let them know that I was concerned. We did discuss the need for independent experts and independent sampling and reporting of data on the water to help restore the public trust.
Thank you very much, Governor. Scott Kim, HPR. Scott.
Thank you, Jody. This question is for the Department of Health. Just curious about the process of flushing the Navy's system. Where does that water all go? Obviously can't go into the ocean, but this is contaminated water that they're trying to flush out. Where does it go? Does it seep back into the ground? Do you monitor that?
So first, let me say that the Department of Health issued the order because of its regulatory requirements to protect human health and the environment. As to the flushing, the Department of Health has set forth clear guidance where if you're going to flush it onto land, you have to take samples first, you have to cordon off the area, and then when the flushing is completed, you have to take samples again. The reason why we're doing this is if the samples that are taken detect some kind of contamination, we can, due to natural attenuation, the contaminants may dissipate, or we can remediate it in other ways. Thank you
very much, Kathleen. Moving on to Sophie. Sophie Cox, Star Advertiser.
Yeah, thank you, Jody. This is for the Department of Health. I wanted to make sure that the guidance, the public health guidance, is clear. My understanding from DOH, and please correct me if this is wrong, but that anybody on the Navy's water system should not be using it for drinking or cooking or brushing your teeth. But that's conflicted with the Navy's guidance in recent days. They've said, well, if you're not smelling an odor and you feel comfortable, go ahead and drink it. I was hoping you could sort of respond to that and sort of help clarify where you guys are coming from on that. And then the sort of corollary question to that is that we're talking about a lot of people, like 90,000 people who are now in limbo about not being able to use their water. Do you have any sense of how long this could go on for, and how you even respond to that sort of disaster in terms of, it's not just military families, it's also schools, as I understand it, and the shopping center, I think at Moana Lua. So how do you sort of respond to the issue of all these people not being able to use water indefinitely?
So the Department of Health's concern is the public health and the health of humans and the environment, right? So until we have adequate information to be able to assure people that the water is safe, we are going to act out of an abundance of caution and say, don't drink the water. So our guidance right now still stands. I think as we get back more test results, as we can map where the complaints are coming from, map where the results are coming from, once we have enough data to be assured that that water is safe, we absolutely will let people know. But I think right now, lacking that data, it's not worth taking a chance to say maybe your water's safe. So until the Department of Health has adequate information, we are going to continue the current order that we have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Char. Christina Jedra, Civil Beat.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify, under this order, how soon do you actually expect Red Hill to be defueled?
Again, I think that's a tough question to answer in terms of a specific date or time, because a lot of it's going to depend on the order the portion of the order that says to bring in an independent third party to develop a plan, a work plan, and a timeline in order to evaluate the system integrity and see what needs to be done in terms of remediation or to render the system safe so that you can transfer fuel. So one step kind of depends on the prior step. So we're going to have to take it step by step to see. So this is not something that's going to happen overnight, but we were hoping that it will happen sooner than later. And I believe there's wording in the order about 30 days to come up with at least a plan.
Christina, did you have a follow-up?
Thank you. Yes. Is the state willing to take the Navy to court to enforce this order if they don't want to comply?
Dr. Char taking that question.
I think, to be clear, we all have the same goal, and that is that we have safe drinking water for everybody and we have a safe environment for our community. And I don't think there's any question that that's the goal for all of us. So I think if we can work together and work cooperatively and accomplish things a lot faster, share results with each other, really work as partners on this, I think we'll be able to make progress a lot more quickly.
Thank you, Dr. Char. Any other questions? One more from Christina. Go ahead.
Sorry, two more actually. Dr. Char, can you tell us what the status of the contested case hearing and the Navy's permit? This case has been going on a long time. What is the status of it?
I'm probably not the best person to answer legal type questions, but my understanding is that the issue of the permit has been remanded back to the hearings officer to make a determination as to whether or not to reopen the case to consider additional information. And so that's what we're waiting for right now. That's my understanding.
Is that matter just moot at this point, considering this new order?
No, I don't think it's moot at this point. I think there are still a lot of unknowns. So let's see what the consultants come up with in terms of what they identify, what kind of things they're putting into plans for remediation or identifying in the system's integrity studies. And let's go from there.
Okay, Christina, go ahead. One more follow-up.
Okay, we've heard that there are hundreds of complaints from people who smelled fuel in their water, but do we know how many people have actually reported getting sick?
Joanne Cito is taking that question.
Thank you. The reports that we've been getting at the Department of Health through our email and phone lines has been about 400 people, but we have not delineated between people who have identified that they've drunk the water or they smell it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sophie, go ahead.
Yeah, this is for the Department of Health. Obviously the controversy about Red Hill has gone on for a long time, 8 years. We've heard a lot from the Navy over the years about how their leak detection system is adequate and they keep doing all these upgrades and that, they have all of these protections in place to prevent something like this happening. At this point, it's over a week now since we started getting reports about the fuel odors and contamination, and we still don't know how the fuel is getting into the water. We really lack information about test results, like what the quantity of petroleum in the water was, what type of chemicals there are. At this point, what would really take you, at this point, how can the state be comfortable having that facility persist in the future? Obviously, you're calling for this big pause in operations, but does that shake your confidence in the Navy's ability to safely operate it in the future?
So when we got the complaints, what we did was we did some investigation. We have investigation is ongoing. Was trying to determine the source of the contamination. We issued the order that will cause the Navy to do an investigation and on the integrity of the tanks and the system. And based on that, we can go forward on remediation and protection of the water.
Okay, Christina, one more question and then we have to wrap up. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. It looks like this order does not include a drinking water treatment facility or increased monitoring at Halava Shaft, and that's the one that the general public uses. Why is that?
Joanne taking that question.
The Halava shaft that you are referring to is run by the Honolulu Board of Water Supply as part of their system. So that would not be impacted by the Navy water system.
Okay, thank you very much, Joanne. And with that, we'll wrap it up with Governor's closing remarks.
I just wanted to assure the public that we are taking action. The emergency order issued by the Department of Health is really focused on defining a path forward for identifying the cause of the contamination and developing a work plan so that we can take the action necessary to ensure that our water remains clean and safe. And we look forward to working with the Navy to identify the source of contamination. And I think most importantly, determining what actions are necessary for the long term to ensure that the facility can operate in a safe way. So thank you to everyone.